Hello everyone, I'm here today to do my wrap-up for January, and in January I read 12 books, and I almost completed my TBR. So my main TBR was to read the two books that were like the oldest and the longest books in my TBR, which I did, and then I wanted to read a bunch of ebooks because I wanted to not be in Everand anymore, and unfortunately that was not possible because Everand sucks even more this time, and it only let me read 3 of the 5 books I was hoping to read. So I'm going to keep it until February and read the 2 books that I have left. But instead of that, because I also wanted to read a bunch of books from Kobo Plus, it's like the Kindle Unlimited of Kobo, which is like the one that is available here the most. So I did read a bunch of books that in ebook that were in that other subscription, and I did finish those because that one is actually unlimited, not like Everand. They say it's unlimited, but it's not. And then I also read another book that was not related to any of that, and was sort of in my pile of possibilities for January. I also kind of accidentally saw the Buzz Wordathon challenge that Lalla and the Books organizes. So Lalla and the Books is one channel that I have not follow, like I'm never subscribed to her, I think, but I have things that pop up in my feed from her and I sometimes watch them. And so I'm kind of aware of the things she does. And I have been aware that the Buzz Wordathon challenge was a thing for a while, but I have never kind of properly participated, and I don't know why, but I checked in January if I had things that fitted that challenge, and I had, so I also kind of joined that challenge accidentally, and I don't know if I'm going to do it for every month or not. I think that when I checked there were things that were in my TBR that fitted for a lot of the challenges anyway, so I might do it, I don't know. I did it this month and we're gonna talk about these books as well. That's more or less the overview of my month. Also, I think I started with 45 books in my Storygraph TBR, and now there are 33 books in my Storygraph TBR, 30 of which are in my Ancient TBR. So I only have 30 books left in my Ancient TBR, which is a big step because I was a little bit apprehensive about my Ancient TBR being kind of big, but now 30 books seems a lot more manageable at this point. So yeah, talking about the books, the first book I finished is Katalin Street by Magda Szabó, and this follows 3 families that live in the same street in Budapest, and it's never fully stated, but I think it's when the Second World War broke down, and it's kind of like, it's not directly mentioned, but for example one of the families all of a sudden has to kind of go into hiding and leave, and one of the characters goes to war, and we never told anything about the war or about why these characters were persecuted, but it's kind of, if you know history, you know that they were persecuted because they were Jews, and you know that this boy is going to war against Germany. Like, those are things that are not said but are kind of known. And yeah, it follows basically these 3 families. So one of the families is just this boy and his dad. The other family is 2 girls, their parents, and then the other family is 1 girl with her parents as well, that moves from the countryside at the beginning of this book, and that is the US family that is trying to run away from something, even though we're never told what it is, but we all know what it is. And basically it mostly follows the older daughter of the family with the 2 daughters. We mostly follow her perspective, and all the 3 girls are kind of always in love with the boy that is in the story. But they have very different personalities, and the older of the two sisters is the one that is going to marry him. And we are told this from very early on, that that's their destiny, but we still have to make it there. And there are points at which it was like, how are they going to get married? They hate each other, they don't talk to each other anymore, blah blah blah. And it kind of follows like, these people love each other a lot, but they also hurt each other a lot, and it was kind of frustrating to see how much they hurt each other, and how much they change throughout the years, and how much messier things become as the years go, and as the events happen. There was one element of it that I was not very sure about, because the Jewish girl, she comes back to the story as kind of like a ghost. I don't think that was necessary, but other than that, I really enjoyed the book. Well, they are very, it's very messy, but I enjoyed my reading experience of it. I think that Magda Szabó is very good at like making people hurt each other for reasons that are not intentional, but still it hurts a lot. So yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect of this, and I enjoyed the book. I think Magda Szabó is a very good writer. Next book I read is A Line in the World by Dorthe, and this is kind of a memoir sort of thing of Dorthe. Is a Danish writer, and someone contacts her to write about the Danish coast, and she talks about like the North Sea and the line of the North Sea. And so from the Netherlands up to Denmark, there is this like coast in which there's a bunch of islands that kind of make a line that goes all the way from the Netherlands to Denmark, and that's kind of like where she's focused on in this book. And just follows it's very atmospheric of this region, and because I live in the Netherlands, I understand like when she talks about like this very rowdy ocean and these very windy places. I understand because that's exactly how it is. And yeah, she talks about like a chronicle. She chronicles her travels back and forth through this line. Well, not through the line, she traveled by land, but still like back and forth this coast. I liked this much better than her other book I read. I think it's her writing style suited this much better, because it doesn't have to have a story. It's more of a meditations about the sea and the coast and the people that live around there, and the different like jobs and things that these people have based on the location they live in. It was very lyrical, it was very meandering, but that again fits kind of the topic, so I enjoyed it more than her other book that I have read. And I also enjoyed that it had little illustrations and things like that. I thought that was very cute. But I also would say there was one thing that disturbed me. So she talks a lot about Denmark and she talks a lot about the Netherlands, but there is this huge land of mass in between called Germany. She barely mentions Germany, and it's like, well, I mean, it's also part of it, right? But no, she doesn't talk about it much, which I found kind of disturbing for some reason. But other than that, it was nice. Then the next book that I read was The Forbidden Notebook by Alba Céspedes, and this book was very smart. So this is about a housewife in Italy, I think in the 50s or 60s, or maybe earlier than that. And it follows this housewife, and she does work. Everyone is very scandalized that she works, but her family needs the money, so she works in an office. And she, at the beginning of the book, she gets a notebook and she kind of writes in it like a diary. And a lot of what she writes about is the fact that she should not have this notebook, and her family shouldn't know that she has this notebook, because her family assumes that she has no thoughts whatsoever. As a housewife, she's not allowed to have thoughts, private anything. And so how to hide this notebook so that nobody asks questions, nobody has to ask about it, nobody has to read about it. yeah, she doesn't want her family to know that this notebook exists, but she doesn't have a place to hide it because nothing of hers is private, because she's the mom of the house. So everyone wants things from her all the time, but nobody gives her anything back, sort of. And her children are kind of adult-ish. They're like 18, 19, 20, around there. They're in university, and yeah, her older one is kind of like very rightful, and he always wants to do the right thing. And the younger one, she's a little bit more like flingy. She meets boys here and there, and we follow the mother of this family, like explaining all of these things to herself, and how all of them in all of these situations, they never ask for her opinion, they never consider what she thinks, they never consider how these things affect her. At some point the older boy is going to have a baby, and they're like, oh, then my mom will just quit her job and take care of the baby. And the mom is like, no, but I enjoy my job. It's something that's for myself as well as just the money. Like, of course it tells everyone that it's for the money, because otherwise it's scandalous that she's working. But she actually enjoys having a job and being independent and being like looked at as a human. And she talks about all of these things in her notebook, and it's very interesting. It's very well done. I really enjoyed it. I think it's very clever the way that the author thought about putting all of these things as in the form of a notebook, and the fact that she has to hide it in the notebook, and the fact that she gets so frustrated about her family not recognizing that she's a human. All of that is so well done. So I really enjoyed it. I think it's very, very good portrayal of what being domestic looks like, and how people often consider their moms not to be humans in a way. Like they don't consider the feelings of them as much as anybody else's. And I think that is very true. I mean, if I think about many people, including myself, we probably don't treat our mothers with the respect that they deserve. Then the next book I finished was The Easy Life by Marguerite Duras, and this one follows a 25-year-old that is like in the family farm, and she cannot leave, and she feels like life is just passing by and she's not doing anything with it. And then someone dies and her life breaks apart, and so she has to leave the farm, and we follow her kind of like disintegrating. Yeah, for me it was one of those coming of age stories that it's just fine. I don't have anything against it, but I didn't think it was all that impressive, to be honest. Then the next one is A Silent Share by Lalla Romano, and this is again about the Second World War, and it's set in a small town in Italy, and it's kind of like these families trying to hide from the regimes that are sprouting, and like the restlessness of the time. Yeah, it's focused on the small things that people do in hard times, sort of. I thought it was fine. Didn't have massive impact on me. I think it's very forgettable, but it was fine. The next book I read is What Have You Left Behind by Bushra Al-Maqtari, and this is very reminiscent of Svetlana Alexievich. I think she was very inspired by her. But basically she did a lot of interviews of people affected by the Yemeni war in 2015, and killed a lot of people, and she mostly has like interviews of a few pages of they killed my brother, they killed my sister, they injured my husband, stuff like that. And at the end of each chapter we do have a small paragraph about the attack that is being talked about, and how all these people left their loved ones behind, basically. It also covers some people that were like actively involved in the war, but mostly I think it's innocent people, and they were not directly involved in the conflict, but they were affected by it. I think it was very hard. The stories of these people are very hard to read, and especially the last story that it's in the book is from the author herself, and she's like, this person was supposed to come and celebrate the publishing of this book with me, and instead they died, kind of. It's very sad. It's like what happened is very horrible, and it's very sad. I did find the book as a book kind of repetitive, because the stories kind of are the same, not the same, but yeah, they are all about people that died and shouldn't have, and it's very difficult, and I understand, and it's good to give these people a face and think about them in the context of their lives, and I think that's what this book was trying to do. But yeah, as a reading experience, it does get a little bit repetitive at times, which sounds horrible to say, but yeah, it is unfortunately what happened to a lot of people, and so all of their stories are very similar to each other. The next book I finished was Wellness by Nathan Hill, and this one was, so Katalin Street was my oldest book in my TBR. This one is the longest book in my TBR, or was the longest book in my TBR. I've read it now. This follows a couple that kind of meet by chance in Chicago in the 80s, I think. They were living in apartments next to each other, and their windows were like facing each other, and so they kind of watch each other at the evenings when the lights were on, and they kind of fall in with each other, and then at some point they meet in a bar and they become a couple. And he is a photographer and an artist, and she is, how to describe her, she is like a scientist, kind of, and in a big part of this book she works for this company called Wellness, and they kind of try to figure out if things that people sell are actually working or they are placebos, basically. And so there is a lot of psychology, science and other things going on in that, and like she has to think about experiments in which it will prove or not prove that it's a placebo. So that's kind of what the book is doing. And they meet and they fall completely in love, and they're like soulmates, and then they have a kid, and then at some point they want to move to the suburbs because it's better for the kid, and they have a lot of school runs, and all of this bohemian life they thought about in the city kind of falls apart, and they both have very dark pasts, not because of themselves, but their parents were both very abusive. And yeah, I mean, she comes from a very rich family, but her dad was very abusive, and he comes from a very poor farming family. But her mom was very controlling and detached, and he also has things to work through family-wise, and so that's why they both were in Chicago in the first place, and that's repeated over and over again, that they both ran away from their lives to Chicago to do something else. There were very interesting things. It's very difficult to describe some parts of this book. There is a lot of talk about social media, especially at the end, because he, on one hand, they are trying to make him be in social media more for his job as an artist. It's valuable for his job to be in social media, but at the same time his father is in Facebook, and he's like obsessed with conspiracy theories, and he's trying really hard to like try to debunk every single conspiracy theory he comes up with. But again, it's very hard, and yeah, there are all these different complicated things, and their life becomes messier and messier as they go through, and they kind of, at the beginning of the book, they were like very sure what they wanted and what was the right thing for them, and then at the end, like, they are in crisis, their marriage is in crisis, they are trying all these different very crazy, very weird things, and it is not working for them, and it's kind of like things are falling apart and up to a point, and those ideas that they had of themselves are falling apart, and it's kind of like them like having to being forced to accept the things that are happening and the things that happen in their past as well. That doesn't give you any proper idea of what this is about, but that's kind of the best summary I can give to this. I think it's very difficult to summarize a book like this, but I liked it. I think that there are some things that are not super good that go unquestioned, like the fact that they stalked each other through the window when they were young, and there is a point in which it's addressed, the fact that, like, when they're older and people ask them, how did you meet? It's not great to say, like, we stalked each other through the window. So she says, I used to see him from my window, because it sounds a lot better when a woman says it, but that's as much as it's addressed, the fact that that's very creepy. And there are other things that are kind of like, I don't know, uncomfortable. Some parts of, somehow this book made me uncomfortable. Not in a way of looking inside myself and trying to grow, but in a way of, this is icky and I don't know why. But yeah, it's, I mean, I enjoyed the story. I think Nathan Hill is a very good storyteller, and the writing was good. I have no issue with that. I think I had this same feeling with 4321 by Paul Auster. There was something icky about that. That is also here. So if you like that, probably you will also like this. If you didn't like that, probably don't pick this one up. But yeah, I liked it. I didn't love it. Then I read Cocoon by Zhang Yueran, which was actually the pick that I got for the buzzword cover challenge thing, which was to read a book with a pattern. And I do have books that have better patterns than that. Yeah, like these parts are pattern. I have this one, I have this one, I have this one. So I have a lot of books with patterns actually, but none of those books are short, and none of those books were in my original TBR, and Cocoon was, and that kind of colory thing is pattern enough for me. So this is the one I chose for that challenge, and this follows two people that knew each other from childhood in China. They both come from dysfunctional families. They both grew up in the 80s and 90s, and now, like in modern time, they kind of reunite, and they discover that all those things that they had in common back then, they still have in common, and there's this like attraction to each other. But at the same time, both of their grandparents were, I think, in the Cultural Revolution, and they wanted to follow their steps, but there's still a lot of trauma associated with it and what happened to their grandparents. And there's also kind of like a mystery between all of that, and I just thought it was like a little bit messy, to be honest. The characters were very two-dimensional. I didn't feel like they were real people, and the story was very slow and full of details that nobody cared about. So yeah, I didn't love that one, unfortunately. I think there is an audience for it. I think there are some people that will like that, but it was just not for me. And there was nothing grabbing me. The characters were not grabbing me, the story was not grabbing me, the themes were not strong enough for me to be interested in them, so yeah, I was not super impressed by it. The book in my list is Vernon Subtext 1 by Virginie Despentes. I read this in French because I had an English copy, and then I lent it to a friend and she never gave it back, so I didn't want to buy it again, and my library only had it in French, so I read it in French. And this is about this man that had a record shop, and he was famous in his day, but now he's like a struggling author, not author, but a struggling artist person, kind of. With that money he's trying to pay rent, he doesn't have, and so he has this film that from this famous person that just died of an overdose, and a lot of people want it, but he's trying to like conserve it but also make money, and they go from Paris to Barcelona, back from Paris to Paris. Yeah, there is a lot of going back and forth. And there is a lot of like trying to be offensive and trying to be subversive and trying to be edgy and stuff like that in this book, which is not normally my favorite thing, so I'm not sure I was like overly taken by this book. I think the tone just rubbed me off the wrong way. I can understand why people like this, I can understand why there's an audience for it, but I just didn't think it had a lot of substance to it, so I was not super impressed by it. And the next book I read was Little Dancer Age 14 by Camille, and this was my pick for the Buzzwordathon challenge because the prompt was something to a word like truth, true, lie, lies, that kind of thing, and the subtitle of this is The True Story Behind Degas' Masterpiece, so I think that counted enough as a subtitle. This sculpture by Degas is like one of his masterpieces, considered one of his masterpieces, and this book tries to follow the model for that piece, which her name was Marie van Gotem, and she was a little she was 14 when this was done, and she worked in the Paris Opera as a dancer, and now that is a very luxurious and very fancy work, but at the time in the 1880s it was very hard work, it was very badly paid, and mostly just young poor girls went there. Also, they were expected to entertain the patrons of the opera backstage after the acts, so girls from 11 up were supposed to go on the backstage with men, grown men, and do things for them. We all know what that means, right? And yeah, basically this book tries to follow the story of this girl, and they were called the Little Rats of the opera, and how hard that life was. I like the exploration of that as a concept, but I don't know that this had a lot of point, because in the back it's like she like does a very rigorous search on what this girl's life would be, and it is true that she tries to be very rigorous with it, and she doesn't want to make a story for her that's not there, but at the same time there's no record of her after she leaves the opera. So after she's 14, 15, we don't know anything about her anymore. She disappears, and this book doesn't find anything about it. So it's like, yeah, don't invent stories about her getting married and doing other things, but also the only thing we know is that her little sister was also a dancer, and she was actually good, and she was actually successful, and she became a teacher, and her older sister became a prostitute, and that's all we know. We don't know anything about her, and this book was like 100 pages about what her life was up to 14, 15, and say over and over again, I tried really hard, but I didn't find anything else after that. So it was okay. I enjoyed parts of it, but it felt very pointless by the end. The last book that I read was Blue Machine by Czerski, and I really enjoyed this. I made a full review of it. It's basically about the ocean. The author is a physicist, and so it has a very physical approach to it. It explains about the physics, the temperature, the salinity, the movements, the currents, all of that, like ocean as a physical object kind of thing, which I thought it was very, very interesting. It also talks a little bit about the life inside the ocean and the life on top of the ocean, which will be the humans, but it mostly focuses on the physics, I think, and I found it very, very interesting, very, very enlightening. And I also like that in the last chapter it talks about the effect of humans on the ocean, and it says we definitely have to do something, but I didn't want to focus on that because I think it's also important to stop and appreciate what an amazing machine this is before we start doing anything, because otherwise we are not going to have the drive to do the right things. So yeah, really enjoy, really recommend. And that's it. Those are all the books that I read this month. Now for my TBR for February. So the longest book in my TBR, other than Wordbreaker, and we have already discussed Wordbreaker, is in hold on my library. Is not gonna come anytime soon, so I'm gonna read the next one, and that is Our System So Magnificent It Is Blinding by Magda Svensson, which is about triplets. Don't know much more than that. The oldest book on my TBR is another Magda Szabó, and it's The Form. I also don't know much about what this one is about. It says it's about an actress and about her trying to feel accepted and resentment. I don't know, we'll see. I love Magda Szabó's things so far, so I hope I like this one too. And then the other two books that I really, really need to read are Edo's Souls and Things Remembered and Things Forgotten, because those are the two books that I have left on my TBR from Everand, and I want to cancel my Everand after that. And then the last two that are here are for the Buzzword Song Challenge. So this one is Yogurt and Jam by Elena Merger. It's a small graphic novel about life in Lebanon, and this I think counts for the cover challenge, which is a skyline, and I think this counts as a skyline. It's the closest thing I have in my TBR, so it's gonna have to work. And the one for the word was a water related word, and I chose The Lost Rainforest of Britain by Guy Shrubsole. This was a Wine Rights Prize winner for 2023, and I'm also trying to read through those winners, so I thought this will fit perfectly for that. Rainforest, rain. Rain is a water word, so we're gonna go with that. So yeah, those are the books I'm hoping to read in February. Let me know if you have read any of the books I've talked about. Let me know if you have any thoughts on them. And until next video.